Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heartland Mamas. I'm Murray Briel.
And I'm Heidi Henry, coming to you from two socially distant studios at the edge of the Great Red Divide, where every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 o'clock on Facebook, we bring you the progressive news and views that you can use. You can find all of our previous works at heartlandmamas.com, all podcast platforms, YouTube, and proudly part of the Demcast USA network. Today, Murray, we're going to take on Mitch McConnell and his railing against the 1619 project, which, Murray, when 1619 came out on the podcast platform, I was a huge fan, and I've listened to that series 3 times now, and re-listened to it again for today's show. I don't see what the harm is in learning the factual truth about the origins of the USA. What do you say?
Heidi, I think you're absolutely right. And here you're spot on. We have a situation where the 1619 Project was originally an organization that was founded to celebrate 400 years of the first slaves being brought to America. And a journalist, Nicole Hannah Jones, put together an essay, papers, essays, first, personal accounts, poetry, writing, song, to give the historical perspective
Yeah.
of what that means, slavery, and how it founded the entire nation going forward. And this is
Yeah.
like a monster topic, guys. So I want to tell all of our listeners that we are going to be doing an unroll on this for our independent radio show. So be sure to check that out if you want to learn more and deeper dive on this topic.
Right. It's an incredible story, Marie, and it begins on August 20th, 1619, when a ship rolled up with 20 live humans aboard to a place called Point Comfort in Virginia, right off the coast. It was an English colony, so a WASP colony, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant colony. And that ship rolled up and sold the lives of 20 human beings that had been ripped apart from their families and sailed from Senegal all the way to the USA, from Africa to North America. So it's not like they could swim home. There was no chance of going home. And I imagine those people sometimes in the cargo hold, and I think because there's a language barrier, of course, and what they must have been thinking as they were taken out, kidnapped, shackled, and taken off to sea. A lot of slaves didn't make it to the United States. A lot of them went to Brazil, Central and South America, into the sugar plantations in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Hispaniola. Um, but a good fraction of them, a good portion of them made it here. And slavery, while being abolished in Europe, was thriving. It was a thriving business plan, a business
Enterprise.
construct in the
Because
USA.
the entire belief is that the white Anglo Saxon Protestant European male is the only one who is of any value. And that has
Right.
always been a superiority thing back to before even 1619.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I believe that's a big part of what this project talks about is I hope people don't miss the bigger picture. Yes, it is all about how our nation was based on slavery and capitalism and mercenary capitalism because
Yes.
people were commodities. It's all about mercenary capitalism. But, it also goes even deeper than that.
Yeah. The roots are so deep because we've spoken, Murray, so many times about how mercantilism was the reason for Europeans to conquer the rest of the world. It wasn't it wasn't a benevolent issue. It was how much can we find someplace else that we can bring back to Europe? How much gold, how much silk, how much whatever, how many spices can we find other places, either bargain for them or steal them and take them back to Europe? That was all that was about. There was
Absolutely.
no, the founding
And
fathers,
slaves were no different than spices. They were a
right?
commodity for capitalism, a commodity for control and power and greed. And that's a
Yes.
big part of, what this project talks about. And Heidi, you really went into a lot of depth. This is why I love my partner Heidi, because we decide on a topic and we both take different avenues with it. And so Heidi
As
really,
always.
yeah, and it works out beautifully. And you really went into how the project explains every aspect of our nation was supported and built off of these principles, this inequity. And for me, I took more of the historical and cultural slant of how can that be twisted. So go into some of that, Heidi. I think it was just amazing.
You know, Maria, the more I read, the more rabbit holes there were to fall down, because this was not a curriculum that was taught to me in high school or college. This was not anything any of us were ever taught. So for those of us that love history like you and I, Murray, we get into these rabbit holes and we're like, "Oh my God, is that what really happened?" And then the facts back that up, and you're like, it's like the clouds lift from your eyes. So that was how I felt the first time I listened to 1619. And sometimes the emotions grab you, and it breaks you. It just, and it should break you. It should break you into a million pieces when you hear it, because it shows you how everything that we have today, our modern banking system, our pick rates at the Amazon warehouse, our modern policing and prison system, are all based on what happened in 1619. On that very day, it started that be afraid of black people. Be afraid of
On
anybody who isn't
mercenary
you.
capitalism.
Yeah, mercenary capitalism was the founding of us, and we have to turn and take a good hard look at it, because, ladies and gentlemen, we either embrace that past and the truth that is within it, or we can never be successful as a country until we look at it, take it apart, blow it to pieces, and examine every part of it and atone for it, because we have a lot to atone for. We can never move forward. What
You're
happened in
absolutely right,
Ferguson,
Heidi.
what happens in Minnesota, Breonna Taylor, all of that will continue to happen until we can take it apart
Our criminal
and see
justice
what we can fix it.
system, our biases in medicine, everything we know is that's the whole point that we try to make often is built upon a small percentage of a population that has decided that that's what it is. We talk about the inequities in every aspect, and historically, why this is so important. You're right, Heidi. We need to tear the band aid off, and
Right.
we need to understand that, you know, this is why it's terrifying, is because it's going to challenge the
Yes.
false ideologies of this nation. It's going to challenge the ability to control people through patriotism and ignorance and fear, and equating those with nationalism and things that aren't good for our country. When everyone has the information, I believe that a majority of people are going to feel the same way you did, the same way I do, when given that information. And the fact that we have legislatures desperately trying to ban this type of curriculum, or curriculum that involves introducing multiple genders, or on the state and federal level, shows just how critical our perspective of history is and how it needs to change. So there were like I mean, we've got Mitch McConnell writing to the Education Secretary Cardonis, talking about how it's going to cause more division than it does unity, and that is not true. And he actually uses the logic of what it's supposed to be and twists it. I don't know how they do it. I think they just speak a different
Well,
language, Heidi.
Murray, we talk often on our show about the accumulation of wealth and power. And sometimes we talk about it in relationship to Mike Madigan. Sometimes we talk about it in relationship to our former president, Trump. I hate saying that word. Sometimes we talk about it in Amazon, Jeff Bezos, because it's all about the accumulation of wealth and power. Everything is. And, but the truth of the matter is that this is not a new construct. This is the construct, the brutality of the accumulation of wealth and power, of war, of greed, of poverty, of famine.
supremacy and privilege. Of
Yes, it's
supremacy and
all
privilege.
tied to that.
This is all supremacy and privilege. Even the historians who signed a letter coming out against the 1619 project, there were four of them, and they are well known, well regarded historians. And they came out and asked many professors and experts in United States history to sign on with them on this letter, criticizing the project. And what it really boils down to is much of what the project supports is exactly what they promote, but they backhand it. And again, every argument they make is the epitome of the privilege that they live in.
Right.
They're fundamentally, we have people who wrote down history from a slanted perspective. There is no such thing as objective history, right? Somebody
History
has to
is
write it.
written by the winners. History is written by the
It
winners,
used
which
to
are
be,
usually
yeah.
white Anglo-Saxon
Yes,
Protestant
yes.
males.
And we need to understand the whole drive behind it is not to blame white people or white men or you know minimize them. That is not the purpose. The purpose of it is to understand the contributions to our society that we made. Even in slavery, I think that people still don't consider slaves the humans that they were. And they made such, without their work and abuse, the United States wouldn't be where it is. And people lose sight of that.
All you have to do is go to Washington, D.C. and look at any white building. And that would be the White House, that would be the Capitol building, that would be the Washington Monument, which looks like a big giant penis, by the way. If you ever go
Totally
there, the
does.
first thing I thought of, I get off the plane, I'm all excited, I'm like, oh my God, that thing's a penis.
Totally looks like a penis. You're right.
It does. The Lincoln Memorial, the Jefferson Memorial, all of those things were built by slaves. Now, not so true for the war memorials that are there from World War II and Korea and Vietnam, but everything else built by slaves. So all you need to do is go there and see, oh, our history was built by slaves.
And
That
that's so
is it in a nutshell.
important. Yes. Heidi, that's what this project I think really illuminates. It is that we have like women, the Latinx community, LGBTQ, everyone shapes the nation and adds. And our myth of us being a giant melting pot is little more than a political rhetoric tool that they like to use with no substance behind it because
Right.
that side speaks of diversity and inclusion and none of that is actually real, and yet they don't want real facts to support that because they know it's not true.
Very much so, Murray. I look at the history of this and the history of the more recent history of some politicians and certain states rallying against teaching 1619. And by the way, all the materials to teach this are free through the Pulitzer Foundation. So it's not like it's a cost issue to the school systems. Everything is
And
available.
one extra point to that is that the curriculum has all been modified to meet Common Core criteria,
Right.
which is
Right.
very important for schools to be able to teach it. So it's there, it's free, it meets the current educational standard, and yet they are state houses, 8 state houses have proposed bills to ban any teaching that comes out of the 1619 project.
Murray,
They
I
are
think the things that they have in common are these are also states that have just or are in the process of of passing voter suppression laws. Georgia, Florida, South Carolina. We're looking at you. We see you. We see you. We know
And
what's happening.
I don't think that we can forget. You're right. But I mean, we can't forget that this isn't a federal issue as much as it is a state issue.
Yeah.
But the two mesh so deeply. The federal government cannot mandate what states can teach in their schools. They have absolutely no control over that.
No.
They can incentivize it, they can penalize it. They have to establish criteria, and then every state gets to determine how that criteria is met. But, you have a new education secretary. You have Mitch McConnell writing a letter with 31 other senators talking about how it's a terrible, divisive.
Oh, but they all have R after their name.
They do. They do. How did you know, honey?
Doesn't take a lot to guess.
Do you believe I actually have a copy of that right here?
Do you? Do you, Murray?
I do. I have a copy of Mitch's letter to the education.
Are you going to read it in Mitch's voice, or are you going to read it in your Murray voice?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so my first thought when reading it was this letter is exactly why our education system needs repairing. Because the arguments contained in here are nonsensical at best and circular at worst. He talks about how a survey found that only 51% of Americans can name 3 branches of our federal government. Well,
True.
That a 2019 study that majority of Americans in the 49 states in DC would earn an F on the citizenship exam, right?
True.
15% of national high schoolers understand our Constitution, okay? So,
Murray, who continues to cut education funding? What party would that be?
right. Well, who continues to cut social studies and history funding? The
And
Republicans.
civics.
And what is so interesting is that he is very concerned about the reorientation of the bipartisan American history and civics education program and the presidential and congressional academics of American history and civics. So, he's real worried about these programs
Yeah.
that he goes on to say are abysmal failures and non representative of what anyone is learning. And he says that this is what we need to keep doing, is the same horrible thing. This brings me to why do they enforce the same horrible thing, right? Why is that, Heidi?
Murray, because they don't want to give up any of their wealth or power. Mercantilism is still running amok.
And the twisting that happens, like he says, families did not ask for this divisive nonsense. Voters did not vote for it. Americans never decided our children should be taught that our country is inherently evil. Nowhere in any research, in any literature, in any Biden White House education plan, in the Department of Education plan, state education plan, nowhere even with critiques of the 1619 project does anyone say that it paints Americans as evil. Our history is bad. Right. All it says is that your history is not the only history that exists, that white history, white male history, is not the only history that exists. And that is terrifying to these old white men. Absolutely terrifying.
Murray, I'm gonna take us on to a little rabbit trail right now, not down a rabbit hole, but a lot of white supremacists love to talk about the figures of Roman and Greek mythology and Roman history and Greek history, forgetting that for lengthy periods of time here in the United States, those Greeks and Romans were very much not welcome. If you were Italian, not welcome here. If you were Greek, not welcome here. You're too dark. You're too olive-skinned. And in fact, made up the term olive-skinned so that we could discern the fact that Greeks and Romans were not white in their book. And But
It goes
where I'm
back to
going,
all of the conquering that the white nations did.
well,
Come
okay,
on,
so
to the beginning of time. Whoever the hell told a group of pale skinned, pasty mother beepers that they were the ones that were the right and that was it? How do we all keep buying this insanity?
is that in Greek and Roman times, there were no words for racism or colors of skin. People were not segregated, separated, categorized in that manner. And the white supremacists that have adopted their culture thinking that that is the ultimate whiteness are extremely wrong in that because they're extremely uneducated or choose to pick and choose everything like they do.
They just
Forget
like
that
Mitch
there's
McConnell,
the,
just like calling any curriculum that challenges the ideologies of a false nation that we are built on, he wants to ban. State
they,
houses are trying to ban it.
yeah.
Trump came out with the awful
Oh God.
1776
Because
study or
to
whatever the
them,
hell
well,
it
we
was.
had airports then and that we conquered. What was that speech he gave about we took over the airports
I don't know.
during the Revolutionary War? Could anybody be stupider than him? I mean,
but he
I,
did a lot of damage, and this report came out, and all it was fear mongering
yep.
that, and here's the real divide: is that it is racism wrapped up in privilege, and we are not fighting back against that, and
No,
that is something that is a, a bit mind-boggling to me.
we don't take the time to acknowledge the fact that there was great societies on every continent.
Absolutely not. Of
We
course not.
we
You know,
we
the
laud and
Egyptians,
honor.
no.
Well, okay. In high school, junior high, we learned about Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. We barely touched Aztecs um, or anybody in any other country. Like we talked a little bit about the Pueblo Indians, and that was about it. You know, we didn't talk about the great societies in many other countries because white people, our ancestors, pretty much destroyed or disrupted those
Cultures
civilizations.
with converting people to Christianity so that they could
Right.
control the populace by fear, which is exactly what they're trying to do. I
Well,
mean,
you're still trying to do it, Murray. It's just a different
and the funny thing is
tact to try to get to the same thing. You cannot keep covering up history and expect our country, our race, even to survive, right? You can't survive on lies. You can only eat lies for so long before you realize that they're just empty calories and they're going to kill you. You know,
but
you're
that's
going
the
to
thing. That is why they are so afraid because their fear, their real fear is that acknowledging that anything other than white Christian heterosexual male contributions to society will take away what they have. That's the same reason why
you think it
everyone
will?
spins this as being evil or revisionist history, and it's absolutisms, right? Like
We live
every
revisionist history every day, Murray. We
I
live it every day.
and that's the thing is they're not focusing on because they know if they do they'll lose that control, they'll lose that inherent superiority that exists, and they don't want to lose that
Well,
edge.
and here's what dawned on me while I was listening to it today. And you know, I was not a big Bernie Sanders fan. Okay. But this made me fall in love with Bernie Sanders all over again because he sees you. He sees you, Mitch McConnell, and he knows who you are, you know, and he's going to call you on it every damn day for the rest of his life. He sees that this is why we don't have universal health care because like on did you have to read Ayn Rand at all, Murray? Did you ever have to read Atlas Shrugged or The
Yeah,
Fountainhead?
I read
Okay.
Ayn Rand.
So those are books that I had to read in college, which are very difficult books because Ayn Rand was a communist. And the teachers that I had were trying to teach us that through different philosophies, through literature, that people try to change your own philosophy. And that was Ayn Rand was trying to change your philosophy, the reader's philosophy, by buying into her philosophy, which and the thing that the Fountainhead teaches is that only some people matter. Not everyone matters, only some people matter. And this is the same philosophy by the Fountainhead that I find true with a lot of the patriarchy that I see, that like they all read the Fountainhead somewhere in Harvard or some Ivy League school, so that is their truth. And the thing is it was just
But
one woman's philosophy.
but it was a
You
woman,
don't.
see?
Yeah.
So obviously it had to be right. And look how supportive they are of women. They follow a woman's philosophy. See, they love women. Women are
I'll bet
equal.
you they read The Fountainhead. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've not read The Fountainhead, you should read it, but read it with a grain of salt and be prepared to throw it across the room a few times because that's just
So
what
in
you
other words,
do.
don't do it near any computer screens for fear of breaking them, right?
Or on your
But you're,
don't
it
use
is,
the e-reader and bang it when you don't like
and
the
your
word.
professors were right. All throughout the world's history, authors, philosophers, psychologists, people have tried to influence our thought processes and expand our minds.
Right.
And the problem comes when you have a small, tiny group controlling all of that. It goes back to what we talked about in our pre show. One of the most amazing things I ever learned when I was taking women's studies was about a woman, zoology doctor, who went and studied prides. So for 10 years, she went all over the savannah and studied various prides to see how they worked and what their relationships were. And for 150 years prior to that, many researchers had gone out and said that the male dominates the pride. The male fights other males to gain control, and the lionesses are subservient, right?
Yes.
Well, here comes a 10-year research doctoral or a professor who finds that the male lions are not take over a pride, that the pride chooses the male lion and the pride
Right.
will remove the male lion. But it's
Right.
simply that different perspective of a woman seeing it from a different perspective than her predecessors had. And
Well,
proof to validate that, that
that was Joy.
terrifies this tiny power structure.
That was Joy Adamson's work, wasn't it? The one that they wrote Born Free about? I
I
think that
can't
was her work.
remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember because it was a Born Free was a movie in the 60s that all the Furshad children watched. That was my family. Loved that movie. It was about lions living in Africa. It was so cool. So, but I remember even back then her talking about, that the lionesses were the ones that uh steered the pride, and that when the male lions weren't good enough, they just offed them. So not good
Exactly.
enough.
They
Boom.
control, they chose what male it would be. They would decide if they stayed or went. That's what we need to keep focus of is the fact that the 1619 project doesn't indoctrinate anyone. And I want to make sure we hit on this before we head out. But
Yeah.
the Black Lives Matter movement, the 1619 project, the Kendall project, all of these projects that are out there that are designed to expand our educational system are valid because
Right.
history is not one sided. There are many sides of history, and that's how we
Always
engage
has.
in critical thinking. And if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to move forward as a nation. We will never be able to agree on common societal values that we all agree to be bound to.
Well, in Murray, I wonder if the fear of teaching 1619 is going to unlock the minds of our future generations that are going to say, you know what? This is why we don't have universal health care. This is why we don't have predictable scheduling for people to work at. This is why we have pay poverty level wages. This is we don't have why we have the prison the high
School
school
to
to
prison
prison
pipeline.
pipeline. Um, we have to remember that these are future generations that need to learn this, and hopefully will take the ball and run with it. And it's not discrediting the history of white people. I mean, God, we've done some great things,
You're
but it's
right. It is not.
acknowledging,
And that's just it.
yeah,
Is not one single group, Heidi, has said
no,
white people didn't do anything. White people suck. We hate white people. Not
that's
one
not what it is.
project has said this. All
No.
they're saying is that there were other contributions from other perspectives and we need to understand them
Okay.
so that we make better decisions going forward. And that is the entire fundamental purpose of history. And not one of those groups is saying no. And the Republicans are, or I'm sorry, the white Protestant
Male
male
Republicans are the
culture
ones having a problem
are
with it.
saying it's our way or no way. No other group is saying that.
And the thing is that by learning all of the facets of the founding and creation and development of the United States, by learning everything that went into it truthfully, helps us develop plans going forward into our future. And there are some painful lessons that we've decided to bury. It like sometimes you bury your feelings, or in my case, I eat my feelings. My waistline shows it. And we can't continue to bury it or eat it. We have to face it, talk about it, discuss it, dissect it, atone for some of it, at least some of it, and what happened in Tulsa, directly related. And we have to realize that people come in all different shapes and sizes and flavors, and they all
And
help.
contribute in their own ways to making who we are
Okay.
as a nation, which would be the true
Right.
history of
With
America, the true story that
without
would instill that patriotism in
right.
being a nation that works together and is a melting pot and has been contributed by so many different places. And that would give us the pride and the patriotism that would come naturally. Maybe Mitch, as you say, what was his little
I'm
number
just
that
afraid
he
there's no place for turtles in this society.
well, he is. He is absolutely afraid. And yes,
Yeah.
I do. He's afraid there will be no turtles. Oh my God, yes.
But you know what, Murray? I don't think we can cover 1619 in one
No, we
sitting. I think we might
cannot.
have to come back and talk about this again, maybe sometime in the near future. And definitely, we'll take it all apart for the 1 hour unrolled independent radio series that we do. We'll probably be recording that this week and releasing it. So I want everybody to look forward to seeing that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Have you heard 1619? Have you listened to the podcast? Have you read any of the essays or the poetry or done any of the curriculum that goes with it?
Or looked
And
at the
what do you think
critiques from
about it?
historians or the
Yeah.
legislation that's being driven by a fear that we might actually learn what happened. Legislation to ban. This is not like books, folks. This is like big time banning. So we will be addressing this again for sure. Let us know your thoughts. Be sure to comment, like,
Please.
subscribe, and share. Because if you don't, we can't get more people to hear our little voices. So,
Now,
Heartland.
Murray, wait. We are going to have a picture of the person who won our T-shirt. They're going to put the T-shirt on and send us a picture, and then we'll release who it was.
Dum dum da.
And we do have
Wonderful.
these for sale, but we're not going to discuss it now because right now Murray's got to wrap up our show. So go
So be
ahead. I'm
sure to
sorry.
tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. on Facebook. And if you can't, you can catch all of our previous episodes on YouTube, on anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, as well as on Demcast USA. And our episodes are also back out on Facebook. So like, subscribe, share, Heartland Mamas.
MAMAS.com. Thank you for listening today. We'll see you on Thursday at 3 o'clock. Bye-bye now.
Bye bye. That button pushing's tricky.